Just 2 weeks ago, actually, we aired our 636th episode, which makes The Simpsons the longest-running written TV show in primetime history. We surpassed the show Gunsmoke. We want to gloat about it, but there's no one alive from Gunsmoke, so we don't know what to do. We're kind of frustrated about it, looking into a lawsuit, trying to release some of that pressure. But anyhow, the show is this massive success, worldwide, financially, any way you look at it, massive, massive success. And I guess I want to talk about why it's a success. And when people look at why The Simpsons is a success, in my mind, the most important thing about it is the least known thing about it. People look at the show, and we have these amazing animators. We have this star-studded, incredibly talented voice cast. We have incredibly handsome writers. But the real success of the show that nobody frankly knows about is the environment the show is created in. And let me just back up one step to explain. On live-action TV shows, like Suddenly Susan, like any TV show, the way a production week processes or moves forward is Monday morning you have something called a table read, where the actors sit around a table and read the script aloud for the first time. From that point on, you start getting notes from the studio and the network and the actors themselves, and you start rewriting it. So Tuesday, it's almost a new script based on these notes. You do a rehearsal, another round of notes, another rewrite. Wednesday, do it all over again, and then you usually film the show on a Friday. And everyone is scrambling all week. No one's able to find their best footing or what is the best joke. You're just reacting all week, and you end up having a show that's substandard, like, for example, Suddenly Susan. Anyhow, none of that exists on The Simpsons. The reason why is Jim Brooks. I mentioned earlier his resume. Jim is sort of powerful enough that he said to Fox, if we're going to do The Simpsons as a half-hour show, we want no interference whatsoever from Fox. And because Jim is Jim and Fox is Fox, they said yes, they agreed. So the only, if we, backing up a second, really The Simpsons is produced in what I call a creative paradise. If we want to do a story, for the most part, we do it. If we want to do a joke, for the most part, we do it. The only presence that Fox has in the making of The Simpsons is through a division of Fox called Standards and Practices, which is like the censor. And their job is to make sure nothing distasteful goes on the Fox airwaves. They think right now nothing distasteful is going on the Fox airwaves. We had an episode, I'm going to say 4 years ago maybe, where we had a big box type store, and we called it Sprawl Mart. And underneath we said a parody of Walmart. And for whatever reason, it was an advertiser, it was some business relationship, I don't know, the censor absolutely dug their heels in and said, you have to change that, you must change that. Back and forth we went, you know, you're supposed to have no interference, etc. Finally, they insisted we changed it. What we changed it to was this: Sprawl Mart, not a parody of Walmart. We had an episode 3 years ago that said Sprawl Mart, still not a parody of Walmart. And then like a year ago, we had Sprawl Mart, now celebrating 5 years of not being a parody of Walmart. And I wanted to get really into the nuts and bolts and under the hood of our creative process and our innovative process in the hope that it offers something to all of you that you can learn or take back to your own jobs or your own personal lives in trying to be creative or innovative. To do that, I'm going to start talking about jokes, and I'm not going to talk about them in a fun, entertaining way. I'm going to talk about them in the most dry, academic way. This is a great time to check your emails. I may check my emails during this too. But a joke is, and forgive me if any of this sounds patronizing, a joke is a really great example of an innovation when it works. Again, I apologize if it's patronizing, but a joke is two parts. There's the setup and there's the punchline. And for a joke to work, the setup has to be something that the listener can relate to, understand, get on board with. And the reason that we laugh, hopefully, at a joke is because of the surprise. We weren't expecting it based on the setup. It's a twist on what we thought, and it's a good innovation because of the surprise. So it took something we're used to, and it turned it in a new way. And that's how a good innovation works, kind of. It takes something we're all used to, and we can relate to, and then it flips it. And that idea of being relatable is key to any innovation, and particularly key to our creative process. Because we work on this animated show where we have this broad canvas. We can do anything we want. Homer's been to space. He lived in an underwater house. He does things no human should ever do. He went to Winnipeg, things no human should ever do. But we connect to our audience always by being relatable, and the way we're relatable is we always have a human emotion that is connected with our audience, and once we have that connection, we then kind of have license to kind of do what we want and have fun with it, but we're always grounded to the audience because of this emotion, and it's not so much about emotion, it's about being relatable and connecting to our audience. So it's always, always super important to us to be relatable, and a quote I always offer up about this comes from the great comedian Sid Caesar, also late. I'm only quoting dead people today, it's the theme. But Sid Caesar, the great comedian, he said the guy that invented the wheel was smart, but the guy that invented the other 3 was a genius. So Sid Caesar. So that's the first thing, is really being relatable, connecting to our audience, the biggest thing. And then once we get to work, we start sort of cranking out ideas, start sort of being innovative. I talked about our process earlier when I was talking about the Krusty example. We start brainstorming. And as soon as you talk about brainstorming, people are very quick to throw out the old adage, well, there's no bad ideas in brainstorming. That's not true. There are bad ideas. And the truth is, of course, they're bad ideas. At The Simpsons, people call them Joel's ideas. But what we found is there's real value to bad ideas. There's 2 real things about bad ideas that are incredibly valuable. The first is, with any bad idea, it's a great chance to test, indeed, if you do have this creative environment. I talked about our creative environment, but in a brainstorming session, you also have a smaller creative environment. And if someone says something that might be a bad, quote or unquote, bad idea, if it's welcomed into this session without the person feeling embarrassed or mocked for their bad idea and making them want to pitch something else or suggest something else, that's what you want. That's a good creative environment. And every bad idea tests that environment. Good ideas are great to embrace and easy to embrace. It's how you embrace and deal with the bad ones that really sort of test that environment. So we want that, and we want ideas to come in, because the other great thing about bad ideas, about any idea, is that in any idea, there's always a nugget of something that someone hears and then can build momentum off and then have their own idea. And you start building momentum, and we have found without fail that the more this sort of avalanche of ideas come, you end up getting to a place you never would have got to as an individual. You kind of need this train to go. Sort of like if anyone knows the theater of improv, it's always this yes and. You take what someone says and you build on it. And we always want to keep building on ideas. An example of how that works on the show. We once had an episode where I showed you earlier, you can see here, Maggie has her soother in. And it's not, the doctor told Marge, you have to take away her soother, pacifier, it's not good for her, it's bad for her teeth. If anyone has one in right now, I encourage you to take it out, it's bad for your teeth. So Marge takes it away, and Maggie can't sleep, and she's whimpering in her crib all night, and Homer can't sleep because he hears his little daughter whimpering and crying. And being a loving father, Homer goes and gets her the dog's toy and gives her that to suck on instead. So she's able to fall asleep, but every time she sucks on the dog's toy, it makes a little squeak. So Homer still can't sleep. So Homer gets a prescription for something like Ambien, we called it Napian, and he starts taking it. And now he's able to sleep, but as you might remember, there was an issue with Ambien a few years ago that people were getting up and doing odd stuff when they were taking Ambien. Happens to Homer, he starts getting up, he's eating, he's walking around. Bart sees this and realizes he has his own personal zombie slave and starts getting Homer to do anything he can for him. At one point, Homer, asleep, is driving Bart and his friend through town. All of a sudden, Homer wakes up, scared. He tries to slam on the brakes, can't do it in time, goes through a wall. It's the Springfield Fire Department. He knocks out the fireman's pole, hits the alarm bell, which goes off. The firemen sleeping on the second floor think there's a fire. They run to slide down the pole. It's not there. They fall down. They all break their legs. And that's how we began the episode where Homer becomes a volunteer fireman, building on ideas. So that's an example. I also talked about this avalanche, this stream of ideas that we always want. And that's important too. And the best way to get sort of the most productive stream is to start with as broad a base. The stream, I'm ditching the stream analogy. I'm going to the pyramid analogy. Make a note. You want kind of this pyramid to build to the best idea. And the best pyramid starts with the broadest base at the bottom, the most ideas that come in. And the way you maximize those ideas and the broadest base is sort of the different variety, diversity of ideas. And the way we sort of get a diversity of ideas is we use our group of people at the show who are our writers, and we try to have as diverse a background as we can, not just from their lives, but also socioeconomic, because that gives us this diversity of ideas. Everyone has their own perspective, and they contribute ideas that we can then sort of pick and choose the gold from and build to whatever's best at the top. And when I talk about our writers, I'm talking about people that work at the show are not just talented, they're often geniuses. As some people know, most of our writers went to Harvard. Again, I will mention I did not go to Harvard. I went to the University of Alberta, which I don't even think is the Harvard of Alberta. It's kind of the Seneca College of Alberta, I would say. Anyhow, so when I say that all of our writers are these Harvard-educated guys, immediately people think, well, that's not a very diverse group. And the truth is they are. I mean, even though they went to Harvard, we have African Americans, we have Asians, we have Canadians, we have Hispanics. There's also this amazing array of educational backgrounds amongst our writers. We have a guy that graduated from Harvard Law School and worked on Wall Street as a lawyer. We have a PhD in chemistry, PhD in computer science, a PhD in electrical engineering. As I said, I have an MBA. Another guy got into Stanford Medical School and rejected it to come write for the show. His parents were super excited about that. We also, it's not just the backgrounds or educations, it's also age. We have some writers that are in their 60s. We have our youngest writer is 23 years old. As I mentioned, the show is 30 years old, so this guy has never lived in a world without The Simpsons. We've all decided it's probably the nicest thing to do. When the show ends, we're going to kill him. I'm kind of looking forward to it, but it just seems like the right play. So we have this diverse group, we have this creative environment, we're generating tons and tons of ideas, as I mentioned before, and to build that pyramid, or to get to the top of the pyramid, you're throwing stuff away. Obviously, the top is much thinner than the bottom, and we're wasting so much stuff. We will sometimes spend, I'll put it in human hours, maybe, no joke, 60 human hours to get a single joke on the show. It's a ton of waste. It takes 9 months to make a single episode of The Simpsons, and we are rewriting the show that entire 9 months. We're seeing an animation and we're starting to throw stuff away. We even get to the point, it gets harder and harder to rewrite as we move along those 9 months, because as the animation gets more polished, it's expensive and time consuming to change it. But sometimes we know we need to change something for whatever reason, and we will be like a day before the show, and we'll be sitting in front of the TV watching Homer's mouth flapping, and we're counting how many times it flaps, and we're like, okay, we can replace this 7-syllable line with a new 7-syllable line, and we're sitting around a room trying to think of something that we can just change the audio on a Friday, and it's gonna be on TV on a Sunday. And I always look around and I'm like, these guys with me are all from Harvard. Like, these guys should be on Wall Street screwing the middle class, and instead they're next to me, like counting lip flaps of a cartoon oaf. But anyhow, the point is not so much that, but we're always ready to change stuff for a better idea, always ready to exchange stuff. The real point is that creativity is not efficient. I always tell people, if you tell me that your creative process is efficient, I'll say your creative process is broken, because you need to be wasting stuff to find the best stuff. You need to know what's bad to know what's good. I always say that creativity is not like a Tesla on auto drive, but kind of like a Ford Pinto being driven by a drunk driver swerving all over the road, which is how I got in from the airport, incidentally. So anyhow, that's another big thing for us, is we welcome waste. We welcome inefficiency. Another thing is we often try to look at any problem we find. The Sprawl-Mart thing is a good example. When we get stuck, we try to look at the problem from a different angle. And sometimes that's 180 degrees, the complete opposite side of a thing. We had an episode not too long ago where Homer realized if he ate enough, he could get himself to weigh 300 pounds and go on disability. And obviously he does it. He gets so fat that one of our characters said his butt had its own congressman. Republican, I assume. But anyhow, when the idea came up, and we're like, after this, Homer got fat, everyone's talking about it, and in the room there was this general feeling about how depressed Homer was, and how burdened he was, and how sad he was. And somebody just from the back of the room was like, well, what if he loves it? And you could just feel right away this wave, this rush of creative energy, because it was a new, fun, innovative way to deal with this thing. And we had this amazing episode called King Size Homer, where Homer embraced and loved kind of being fat and being a disability. And it was a real fun way to go. So the point is sometimes, excuse me, is try to look at the problem completely from an opposite angle, because your first thought is not often the most creative, it's the most obvious thing. And sometimes challenge yourself, what if, just for the exercise sake, we flip it, and is there a way to address the problem that way?